From the moment Alexander stepped onto a battlefield, history changed direction. Empires that had stood for centuries collapsed in his path. Kings who commanded vast armies fell before him. Cities believed to be unconquerable opened their gates or were destroyed entirely. And through all of it, one fact remains unmatched in military history. Alexander the Great never lost a battle. This was not chance. This was not fate. This was mastery. Alexander was born into war. His father, King Philip II of Macedon, forged one of the most advanced armies of the ancient world. From childhood, Alexander watched campaigns unfold, studied formations, and absorbed the reality of command. By the time he became king at just 20 years old, he was not inexperienced, he was prepared, but preparation alone does not explain what followed. When Alexander crossed into Asia in 334 BC, he faced the Persian Empire, the largest, wealthiest, and most powerful empire on earth. His own army was smaller, far from home, and surrounded by enemies. Any single defeat would have meant annihilation. Retreat was impossible. Survival depended on winning every battle, and when he did, Alexander understood something that his enemies did not. Battles are not won by numbers alone. They are won by speed, coordination, morale, and decisive leadership. He inherited the Macedonian phalanx, long spears, disciplined infantry, but he transformed it into part of a larger system. Infantry pinned the enemy in place. Cavalry struck with precision. Light troops exploited weaknesses. Every unit had a purpose, and Alexander controlled them all like pieces on a living chessboard. At the Battle of the Granicus River, Persian forces waited on high ground, confident in their position. Alexander attacked anyway. He personally led the charge across the river, exposing himself to direct enemy fire. He was nearly killed, but his audacity shattered Persian confidence. The enemy line broke. Asia Minor fell open before him. At Issus, Alexander faced King Darius III himself. The Persians outnumbered him massively. Any conventional commander would have held back. Alexander advanced. He identified the weak point in the Persian line, drove straight toward Darius, and forced the Persian king to flee. Once their leader ran, the Persian army collapsed. Alexander understood a timeless truth: break the enemy's will and the battle is already over. But Alexander was not merely aggressive, he was adaptable. At the siege of Tyre, he encountered a city that believed itself untouchable, protected by the sea. Instead of abandoning the effort, Alexander did the unthinkable. He built a massive causeway across open water under constant attack. When the walls finally fell, it sent a message across the ancient world: no obstacle could stop him. His greatest test came at Gaugamela. Darius assembled an enormous force, war elephants, scythed chariots, tens of thousands of troops on terrain carefully chosen to destroy Alexander's smaller army. It should have been a disaster. Instead, it became Alexander's greatest triumph. He refused to meet strength with strength. He drew the Persian cavalry out of position, created a gap, and struck directly through the center, once again aiming for Darius himself. The Persian king fled for the second time. The empire died in that moment. Alexander's genius was not just tactical, it was psychological. He fought at the front. His soldiers saw him bleed. They saw him risk death beside them. Loyalty became unbreakable. His army followed him across deserts, mountains, and into lands no Macedonian had ever seen. Even when facing unfamiliar enemies in India, armies with war elephants and new tactics, Alexander adapted. He adjusted formations. He studied his opponents. He evolved. He never allowed his enemies to fight the battle they wanted. What truly made Alexander undefeated was his refusal to accept stalemate. Every engagement had a clear goal: decisive victory. He did not trade blows. He ended wars in single moments. Destroyed enemy leadership, seized momentum, and never gave opponents time to recover. By the time his campaigns ended, Alexander ruled an empire stretching from Greece to the edges of India. He had won every major battle he fought. No enemy army ever defeated him. No rival ever broke his momentum. Alexander died young but undefeated. His legacy is not just conquest, it is a blueprint for command: speed over hesitation, precision over brute force, leadership from the front. Adaptation over tradition. This is why more than 2,000 years later, Alexander the Great is still studied, still admired, and still feared. He never lost a battle. While Alexander the Great conquered the world through bold leadership and personal bravery, another commander achieved the impossible through pure strategy, intelligence, and coordination on a scale never seen before. His name is Subutai, and unlike most famous generals, he was not a king, not a prince, and not even born into nobility. Yet Subutai never lost a major campaign. He did not simply defeat armies. He dismantled entire civilizations across thousands of miles, coordinating battles years in advance, often against enemies who never even knew he existed. Subutai was the unseen hand of the Mongol Empire, the mind behind its most devastating victories. Born around 1175 CE into a blacksmith's family, Subutai rose through merit alone. In the Mongol world, loyalty and ability mattered more than bloodline, and Subutai possessed something rare even among warriors, the ability to see the entire war, not just the battlefield. He served under Genghis Khan, who quickly recognized that Subutai was not merely a fighter, but a thinker. Where others saw terrain, Subutai saw opportunity. Where others saw enemies, he saw weaknesses waiting to be exploited. Subutai understood a principle that most commanders failed to grasp: war is information. Before battles were ever fought, Subutai gathered intelligence. Scouts were sent hundreds of miles ahead. Prisoners were interrogated. Local politics were studied. Rivers, mountain passes, weather patterns, and supply routes were mapped in detail. When Subutai finally committed his forces, he already knew how the enemy would react. And he used that knowledge ruthlessly. Subutai perfected the use of mobility as a weapon. Mongol armies did not march, they flowed. Each soldier traveled with multiple horses, allowing the army to move faster than any force in the medieval world. Enemies could not predict where the Mongols would strike next, because Subutai ensured they were already too late. One of his greatest strengths was deception. Subutai frequently feigned retreats, deliberately allowing his forces to appear weak or broken. Enemy armies, believing victory was at hand, would pursue. Lines would stretch, discipline would collapse. Then, at the moment of maximum vulnerability, Subutai would turn, encircle, and annihilate them. This tactic was not used once, it was repeated across continents. During the Mongol invasion of Central Asia, Subutai helped destroy the Khwarezmian Empire, a powerful Islamic state with large armies and fortified cities. Rather than confronting all forces at once, he divided the enemy, struck supply lines, and eliminated resistance piece by piece. Cities that resisted were erased. Cities that surrendered were spared. Fear became a weapon as powerful as the sword. But Subutai's greatest achievement came far from Mongolia, deep in Europe. In one of the most astonishing campaigns in military history, Subutai planned and executed a coordinated invasion of Eastern Europe using multiple armies operating hundreds of miles apart. These forces did not act independently. They moved according to a single plan, timed with extraordinary precision. European commanders had never faced anything like it. At the Battle of Mohyj in 1241, Subutai faced the Kingdom of Hungary. The Hungarian army was large, heavily armored, and confident. They believed the Mongols were disorganized raiders. They were wrong. Subutai attacked from multiple directions, using diversionary forces to draw attention while his main army crossed rivers under cover of darkness. He employed siege weapons in open battle, bombarding enemy positions unexpectedly. When the Hungarians attempted to hold their ground, Subutai surrounded them completely. The result was annihilation. The Hungarian army ceased to exist as a fighting force. Europe lay exposed, not because of numbers, but because of superior coordination and command. What made Subutai truly unique was his ability to wage war over vast distances. He planned campaigns years in advance. He synchronized movements across thousands of miles without modern communication. Messengers rode with exact instructions. Timetables were enforced. Armies arrived at the right place at the right time, again and again. This was warfare as system, not impulse. Unlike many generals, Subutai did not seek glory. He did not fight from the front. He observed, calculated, and adjusted. If a plan failed, he adapted instantly. If an enemy resisted unexpectedly, he changed the battlefield itself, drawing them into terrain that favored Mongol tactics. He never fought fair battles. He fought winning ones. Even against unfamiliar enemies, European knights, Chinese infantry, Islamic heavy cavalry, Subutai studied and adapted. He borrowed technology, adopted new weapons, and integrated foreign engineers into his forces. Siege warfare, river crossings, winter campaigns, nothing stopped him. Perhaps most terrifying of all was Subutai's patience. He was willing to retreat for months if it meant eventual victory. He allowed enemies to believe they were safe, only to return stronger, faster, and better prepared. His wars were not battles of passion, but of inevitability. By the end of his career, Subutai had helped conquer territory stretching from China to Eastern Europe. He had defeated Russians, Persians, Hungarians, Chinese dynasties, and Central Asian powers. No enemy army ever forced him into defeat. No campaign ended in failure. And yet, unlike Alexander, Subutai died quietly. No empire bore his name. No statues were raised in his honor during his lifetime. But modern military historians recognize something extraordinary. Subutai may have been the greatest strategist who ever lived. He proved that genius does not require a crown, that wars are not won by bravery alone, that information, coordination, and adaptability can defeat any opponent, no matter how strong. Subutai never lost a battle because he never allowed chance to decide the outcome. Every move was calculated, every enemy was studied. Every victory was prepared long before the first arrow was fired. Some generals are remembered for the size of their armies, others for the empires they ruled. But Khalid ibn al-Walid is remembered for something far rarer. He never lost a battle, even when fighting against impossible odds across deserts, against empires with limited resources. His enemies called him unstoppable. His soldiers called him invincible. History remembers him as the sword of Allah. What makes Khalid's story extraordinary is not just that he never lost, but how he fought, how often he adapted, and how completely he dominated battlefields that should have destroyed him. Khalid ibn al-Walid began his military life on the opposite side of history. Before embracing Islam, he fought against the early Muslim forces. Even then, his genius was unmistakable. At the Battle of Uhud, Khalid, then a cavalry commander for the Quraysh, executed a devastating flanking maneuver that turned near defeat into victory. He saw opportunity where others saw chaos. He struck precisely where discipline failed. That moment revealed his defining trait, instant battlefield awareness. When Khalid later joined the Muslim forces, the balance of power shifted permanently. From that point onward, Khalid would fight in more than 100 engagements, skirmishes, major battles, sieges, and campaigns, and he would never be defeated. Khalid's genius was speed, not reckless speed, but controlled, deliberate momentum. He understood that hesitation killed armies. He moved faster than enemy commanders could react, striking before plans were finalized, attacking before reinforcements arrived, and retreating before counterattacks could form. Transformed cavalry into a decisive weapon. Where others used mounted troops as support, Khalid used them as the core of his strategy. His cavalry was not merely mobile, it was flexible. Units could split, regroup, feint, retreat, and strike again from unexpected angles. Enemies rarely knew where Khalid's main force was because he never fought where they expected. At the Battle of Mu'tah, Khalid took command under catastrophic circumstances. 3 Muslim commanders had already been killed. The army was vastly outnumbered by Byzantine forces. Defeat seemed inevitable. Khalid did not panic. He reorganized the army mid-battle, rotated units to give the illusion of fresh reinforcements, and launched controlled counterattacks. Then he withdrew not in collapse but in order. What should have been annihilation became survival. That battle cemented his reputation. Khalid's greatest test came against the 2 greatest powers of the age, the Byzantine Empire and the Sasanian Persian Empire. These were professional armies with centuries of experience, heavy armor, superior numbers, and established command structures. Khalid's forces were smaller, lighter, and often exhausted from continuous campaigning, yet Khalid defeated them repeatedly. Against the Persians, he employed relentless aggression. He refused to give them time to entrench or coordinate. Battles were fast, brutal, and decisive. Persian commanders, accustomed to slower, formal warfare, were overwhelmed by Khalid's tempo. Against the Byzantines, he demonstrated something even more impressive: operational brilliance. In one of the most remarkable marches in military history, Khalid led his army across the Syrian desert, terrain considered impassable, without guides, without established supply lines, and without losing cohesion. He appeared behind enemy lines where no army should have been able to exist. The Byzantines were stunned. This maneuver alone changed the course of the war in Syria. But Khalid's masterpiece was the Battle of Yarmouk. Here, everything was against him. The Byzantine army was enormous. Some sources describe it as several times larger than Khalid's force. They were well-equipped, well-trained, and fighting on familiar ground. The Muslims had limited supplies and nowhere to retreat. This was a battle that should have ended Khalid's undefeated record. Instead, it defined his legend. Khalid took full command of the battlefield. He divided his cavalry into mobile reserve units, capable of reinforcing any threatened sector within minutes. Whenever a Muslim line weakened, Khalid struck with sudden counterattacks. Whenever Byzantine units overextended, he isolated and destroyed them. He controlled the rhythm of the battle. Days passed. Each day the Byzantines grew weaker. Their formations lost cohesion. Their commanders argued. Their morale eroded. On the final day, Khalid launched a coordinated assault that shattered the Byzantine army completely. Cavalry attacks cut off retreat routes. Infantry pressed relentlessly. The enemy collapsed into chaos. The Byzantine defeat at Yarmouk was total. It permanently ended Byzantine dominance in the region. What made Khalid truly exceptional was not just tactics, it was instinct. He did not rely on rigid plans. He read the battlefield moment by moment. He sensed weakness before it was visible. He adjusted formations mid-engagement. He changed objectives instantly if opportunity appeared. Most generals fought the battle they prepared for. Khalid fought the battle that existed. Equally important was his leadership. Khalid did not command from safety. He fought at the front. His soldiers saw him charge. They saw him take risks. They saw him survive wounds that should have killed him. His body, by his own words, bore scars from nearly every part. That presence created unbreakable morale. Armies led by Khalid believed they could not lose because they never had. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Khalid's career is how it ended. Despite his unmatched success, he was eventually removed from high command for political reasons. He accepted the decision without rebellion. He continued to fight as a regular soldier. He obeyed orders. He served without complaint, and he still never lost. Khalid ibn al-Walid died not on the battlefield, but in his bed. Something he once said saddened him because he had sought martyrdom all his life. Yet his legacy was already immortal. He proved that speed defeats size, that adaptation defeats tradition, and that leadership can overcome empires. He fought across deserts against superior forces without ever tasting defeat. That is why history remembers him not merely as a great general, but as an undefeated one. Some generals conquer land, some dominate continents. But Yi Sun did something rarer than all of them combined. He never lost a single naval battle, not one. Across years of war against a vastly superior enemy navy, with fewer ships, fewer resources, and constant political interference, Yi Sun defended an entire nation from annihilation. His undefeated record was not built on overwhelming force, but on discipline, preparation, intelligence, and absolute command of the sea. This is why Yi Sun never lost a battle. Yi Sun lived in 16th century Korea during one of the darkest moments in the nation's history. Japan, under Toyotomi Hideyoshi, launched a massive invasion of the Korean peninsula. Japanese forces were experienced, aggressive, and battle-hardened. Their armies advanced rapidly on land, capturing city after city. On land, Korea struggled. At sea, everything depended on Yi Sun. Unlike many admirals of his time, Yi Sun was not appointed because of noble connections or political favor. He earned his position through competence. From the moment he took command of the Joseon Navy, he understood a simple truth. If Korea lost control of the sea, the war was over. Japanese armies depended entirely on naval supply lines. Cut those lines and the invasion would collapse. Yi Sun built his entire strategy around this reality. Yi Sun believed that naval warfare was not about reckless attack, it was about preparation. Before the war even began, he drilled his crews relentlessly. His sailors practiced formations, maneuvers, and coordinated attacks until they could perform them without hesitation. Discipline aboard his ships was absolute, signals were standardized, orders were clear, confusion was unacceptable. Where Japanese commanders relied on bravery and boarding actions, Yi Sun Sin relied on firepower and formation. He understood that ships were not platforms for swords, they were weapons themselves. This philosophy led to one of the most famous innovations in naval history, the turtle ship or geobuxian. Armored, low profile, and bristling with cannons, the turtle ship was designed not to be boarded. Its spiked roof prevented enemy soldiers from landing. Its cannons allowed it to attack from all directions. It could smash directly into enemy formations, fire at close range, and withdraw without exposing its crew. But Yi Sun Sin's genius was not the ship itself, it was how he used it. From the first naval engagements of the war, Yi Sun Sin demonstrated something the Japanese Navy was unprepared for: control. He never fought battles on enemy terms. He chose locations carefully, narrow straits, coastal waters, and areas where tides and currents favored his ships. He used geography as a weapon, forcing Japanese fleets into confined spaces where their numerical superiority meant nothing. Again and again, Japanese commanders attempted to draw him into open water engagements where they believed numbers would prevail. He refused, he waited, he watched, and when the moment was right, he struck with devastating precision. Japanese supply fleets began disappearing. Troop transports were destroyed, ammunition ships burned, soldiers advanced inland only to find themselves starving and isolated. Without supplies, victories on land meant nothing. Yi Sun Sin was not merely winning battles, he was strangling an invasion. But his greatest enemy was not always Japan, it was his own government. Political rivals, threatened by his success, accused him of disobedience and insubordination. False charges reached the royal court. Yi Sun Sin was arrested, tortured, stripped of his command, and reduced to a common soldier. In his absence, the Joseon Navy was placed under incompetent leadership. The result was catastrophic. At the Battle of Chilchiliang, the Korean fleet was nearly annihilated. Ships were lost, sailors were killed, naval control collapsed. Only then did the court realize its mistake. Yi Sun Sin was reinstated. What he returned to was not a navy, it was the wreckage of one. Yi Sun Sin was given command of just 13 ships. The Japanese navy that faced him numbered over 300 vessels. Any rational commander would have retreated. Yi Sun Sin did not. He understood something his enemies did not. Numbers do not matter where maneuver is impossible. He chose the Myeongyang Strait, a narrow channel with violent currents that reversed direction multiple times a day. Large fleets could not maneuver there, coordination would collapse, chaos was guaranteed. This was where Yi Sun Sin would fight. At the Battle of Myeongyang, he advanced alone at first, drawing the Japanese fleet into the strait. His single ship withstood wave after wave of attacks, using cannon fire and the current to hold position. The Japanese ships collided with one another, unable to control their movement. Then his remaining ships joined the fight. What followed defied belief. 13 Korean ships destroyed over 30 Japanese vessels and shattered the enemy's morale. The rest fled. The invasion's naval momentum was broken in a single day. It was not just a victory. It was a miracle of command. Yi Sun Sin's brilliance lay in emotional control. He did not panic. He did not chase glory. He did not overextend. Every engagement had a clear objective: destroy enemy capability, preserve his fleet, and retreat intact. He never pursued a fleeing enemy if it meant risking formation. He never allowed disorder. He never underestimated the sea. He treated naval warfare as a science. He calculated angles of fire, wind direction, and current strength. He coordinated volleys instead of individual attacks. His fleet moved as a single organism. This discipline made defeat impossible. Equally powerful was Yi Sun Sin's leadership. He shared hardship with his sailors. He enforced fairness. Punished corruption, he rewarded competence. His men trusted him absolutely, not because he promised victory, but because he prepared them for it. Even when wounded, he remained on deck. Even when outnumbered, he advanced. In his final battle at Noryang, Yi Sun Sin led a decisive assault that crushed the remaining Japanese naval forces. During the battle, he was struck by a bullet. As he died, his final words were not of fear or pain. "Do not announce my death. Continue beating the drums." The battle continued. The victory was complete. Sun Sin died undefeated. Sun Sin never lost a battle because he never fought emotionally. He never allowed pride to dictate decisions. He never fought where he could not control the outcome. He proved that preparation defeats numbers, that discipline defeats aggression, that leadership defeats chaos. Against impossible odds, with limited resources, and under constant political betrayal, Sun Sin protected his nation and shattered one of the largest naval forces of his time. He did not conquer the world, he saved it. Rome came closer to destruction than at any other moment in its history during the Second Punic War. Its legions were annihilated, its allies defected. Its greatest armies were crushed again and again by one man, Hannibal Barca. Rome was desperate. And from that desperation emerged a commander who would do what no Roman before him had ever achieved: defeat Hannibal in open battle. Scipio Africanus never lost a major battle, but more importantly, he won the one that mattered most. This is why. Scipio did not begin his career with glory, he began it in catastrophe. As a young man, he witnessed Rome's worst defeats: Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and above all, Cannae, where Hannibal annihilated a Roman army of nearly 80,000 men. The Roman military system, built on discipline and tradition, had failed completely. Most Roman commanders responded by clinging harder to tradition. Scipio did the opposite. He studied the enemy. While others cursed Hannibal, Scipio analyzed him. He learned how Hannibal used terrain, deception, and flexibility. He saw that Rome's rigidity was its weakness, and he understood something radical for a Roman general. To defeat Hannibal, Rome would have to fight like Hannibal. Scipio's first command came in Spain, where Roman fortunes were collapsing. He was young, inexperienced by Roman standards. Many doubted him, but Scipio moved with speed and confidence. Rather than grinding forward slowly, he struck suddenly at New Carthage, the Carthaginian stronghold in Iberia. Using intelligence, surprise, and precise timing with the tides, Scipio captured the city in a single, decisive blow. It was more than a victory, it was a statement. Scipio demonstrated that initiative wins wars. From that moment onward, Carthaginian control in Spain began to unravel. Battle by battle, Scipio defeated experienced enemy commanders without suffering defeat himself. His soldiers trusted him. His enemies underestimated him once, never again. What set Scipio apart was not recklessness, but calculated boldness. He drilled his troops relentlessly, but unlike traditional Roman commanders, he encouraged flexibility. He trained his men to maneuver, to adapt, and to think under pressure. Roman legions under Scipio were no longer blunt instruments, they were responsive and dynamic. Scipio also understood morale. He inspired loyalty not through fear, but through confidence. He shared danger with his men. He rewarded competence. He spoke to soldiers as partners in victory, not expendable tools. This created an army that trusted its commander completely. That trust would decide the fate of Rome. Instead of continuing the war in Italy, where Hannibal remained undefeated, Scipio proposed something audacious: attack Carthage itself. This went against Roman instinct. Rome had always fought defensively against Hannibal, but Scipio understood that Hannibal's greatest strength, his position in Italy, was also his greatest vulnerability. If Carthage was threatened, Hannibal would be forced to return home, and that is exactly what happened. Scipio landed in North Africa and began dismantling Carthaginian power. He defeated local armies, disrupted alliances, and applied relentless pressure. Carthage panicked. They recalled Hannibal. For the first time in years, Hannibal was fighting on unfamiliar ground. The final confrontation came at Zama. This was the moment history had been building toward: two undefeated generals, two radically different styles, two armies carrying the fate of empires. Hannibal deployed war elephants, veteran troops, and layered formations. Scipio had fewer experienced soldiers but superior preparation. He had studied Hannibal for years. He knew exactly what was coming. When the elephants charged, Scipio did not panic. He opened corridors in his formations, allowing the beasts to pass harmlessly through. Trumpets sounded. The elephants turned back into their own lines, causing chaos. Hannibal's advantage collapsed in moments. Then came the infantry clash, disciplined, brutal, evenly matched, but Scipio had prepared for this too. At the decisive moment, his cavalry returned from pursuit and struck Hannibal's forces from behind, the same tactic Hannibal had used at Cannae. This time Rome was on the winning side. The Carthaginian army broke. Hannibal was defeated. The war was over. Scipio Africanus achieved what no Roman had before him. He defeated Rome's greatest enemy not by tradition, but by adaptation. He proved that learning from the enemy is not weakness, it is strength. He never lost a major battle because he never allowed pride to blind him. He respected his opponent. He prepared relentlessly. He chose decisive action over prolonged suffering. And perhaps most importantly, Scipio knew when to end a war. He did not seek endless conquest. He sought decisive resolution. Rome survived because of him. Scipio Africanus stands as the final proof of a timeless truth. Undefeated commanders are not those who never face danger, but those who understand it better than anyone else. He learned, he adapted, he struck decisively, and when the fate of Rome hung in the balance, he won. If you've made it all the way to the end, you're part of a rare group who truly appreciates history and strategy. If you enjoyed this series, make sure you subscribe to the channel for more stories about legendary commanders, epic battles, and the moments that changed the course of history. And I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. It's incredible to see how history connects people from all over the world. Your support helps this channel grow, and it allows us to keep bringing you deeper, more powerful stories from the past. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.